At my son Ethan's wedding, his new wife publicly mistook me for the cleaning staff. My own son, Ethan, stood by silently, saying nothing. I just smiled. But inside, a 29-year-old secret began to scream. My quiet reaction was a promise of a future they wouldn't expect. This is my story. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. Alice nervously adjusted her simple silver necklace. She stood at the Riverside Country Club entrance, a monument to old money, feeling profoundly out of place. This was her son Ethan's wedding, a day she had dreamed of for years, yet its grandeur felt utterly alien to her. Her new navy blue dress, a garment she had saved for, was modest and clean, and despite not being couture, it had filled her with a quiet pride. Her quiet pride began to unravel the moment she spotted Vivian Sterling, Eleanor's mother. Vivian, a woman exuding old money in her custom silk gown, swept her sharp, appraising eyes over Alice's navy dress, then narrowed them ever so slightly. It was a dismissive glance, Alice knew well, one that categorized and found her distinctly lacking. The initial warmth Alice had carried into the club began to chill. She was directed to a remote corner table near the service entrance. From there, the reception unfolded like a distant play. The vibrant laughter and polished conversations reached her only as faint echoes. She felt invisible, a mere ghost, at her own son's celebration. A few tables over, Vivian's clear, cutting voice carried over the din. The catering staff. Always so hard to find good help these days. No sense of discretion. The words stung, a subtle but undeniable reminder of the chasm between their worlds, and the category Vivian had silently placed Alice in. Alice, whose calloused hands were testament to years of working 2 jobs for Ethan, felt a familiar ache of resentment and humiliation begin to fester. The lights dimmed slightly as Eleanor, radiant and poised in her flowing white gown, approached the microphone. Her sweet, melodic voice filled the room. She spoke of love, future dreams, and the joy of uniting 2 families, thanking her parents, her bridesmaids, and Ethan's high-flying colleagues. Alice listened, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips, her mother's pride warring with a growing sense of isolation. Then, Eleanor's gaze swept across the room. Alice's heart fluttered with a brief, hopeful anticipation. Would Eleanor acknowledge her, Ethan's mother, who had raised him alone? Eleanor's eyes paused, drifting towards Alice's quiet corner. A warm, appreciative smile bloomed on Eleanor's face. And finally, Eleanor announced, her voice ringing with what Alice initially perceived as genuine gratitude. I want to thank the wonderful team who made this day possible, especially the lady in the lovely blue dress over there. She gestured directly at Alice, her smile unwavering. Such an efficient and thoughtful cleaning staff. The words hung in the air, a bell tolling the death of Alice's dignity. Her lovely blue dress, chosen with such care, now felt like a uniform, a symbol of her lesser status. Vivian's sharp, braying laugh cut through the stunned silence that followed, a sound of pure, unadulterated amusement quickly joined by the polite, tittering laughter of Eleanor's family. Each peal ricocheted off the high ceilings, a fresh stab to Alice's heart. Her face burned with an intensity that transcended shame. It was an inferno of public humiliation. Every eye in the room seemed to turn towards her, pity and scorn mingling in their gazes. The elegant country club, once alien, now felt like a closing cage, its walls suffocating her. Alice's eyes, wide with disbelief and pain, darted to Ethan. Her son, her boy, now standing beside his beautiful, cruel wife. Ethan looked confused for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as if processing Eleanor's words. He glanced at Eleanor, then back at Alice. Alice waited, breath held tight in her chest, yearning for him to step forward, to correct his wife, to speak her name, to simply say, "That's my mother." But he didn't. He looked down, a slight flush rising on his neck, then remained silent. His hand, which had been resting on Eleanor's waist, subtly tightened, a silent gesture of solidarity. He chose, and his choice was not her. A crushing weight descended upon Alice. Raw, blistering shame enveloped her. But beneath it, a cold, hard knot of rage began to form. She wanted to scream, to stand up and denounce them all, to shatter the elegant illusion of this wedding. More than that, she wanted to flee, to escape the suffocating gaze of judgment and the piercing laughter. Yet, her body betrayed her. She was frozen in place, a statue of indignity, unable to move or speak, her mouth dry, her throat tight. The deepest cut was not Eleanor's calculated cruelty, nor Vivian's gleeful malice. It was Ethan's silence, his failure to defend her, to acknowledge her, to protect her in that moment of profound vulnerability. His inaction spoke louder than any insult. A betrayal of a bond Alice believed unbreakable, forged through years of hardship and unwavering love. He had chosen his new life, his new family, his social standing, over his mother's dignity. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and hollow. All the love she had poured into him seemed to evaporate, leaving behind only the bitter taste of rejection. As Alice sat there, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a faint whisper from the past began to stir within her. A memory, long suppressed, a secret she had buried deep within her soul 29 years ago. A truth that held the power to shatter more than just her son's wedding day. It was a memory of a different kind of betrayal, a different kind of sacrifice, and a vow she had made to herself long ago. This tiny, fragile seed, in the fertile ground of her current pain, began to sprout, slowly, menacingly. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced smiles and distant polite chatter. Alice somehow managed to endure the cake cutting, the first dance, the toasts, each moment feeling like an eternity. When it was finally time to leave, she slipped out unnoticed, a ghost departing a party where she was never truly present. The drive home was a fog of tears, blurring the streetlights into streaks of fractured light. Each tear was a release of the pain, but also a hardening of her resolve. The humiliation, the betrayal, and the profound solitude solidified into something cold and firm inside her. Finally home, she mechanically shed the navy blue dress. It lay crumpled on her bed, no longer a symbol of pride or modest elegance, but evidence, a stark reminder of her inadequacy, of how easily she could be dismissed, overlooked, mistaken for the hired help. It was a uniform of her shame, but as she stared at it, a new feeling bloomed amidst the wreckage of her pride. A fierce, unwavering determination. The secret that had just begun to stir, now pulsed with a quiet, powerful life. She would not forget this day, and neither would they. The navy blue dress lay discarded, a silent testament to the evening's humiliation. Alice, still reeling from the wedding, found herself drifting back through the years, a kaleidoscope of memories flickering through her mind. Ethan's childhood was a tapestry woven with sacrifice and fierce, unwavering love. She had been barely 19 when Ethan's father, a fleeting mistake of a man, had walked out, leaving her alone, pregnant, and utterly terrified. But fear, she quickly learned, was a luxury she couldn't afford. She remembered the relentless rhythm of her early 20s, the clatter of plates at the diner, the smell of industrial cleaner at the office building, the endless scanning at the supermarket checkout. 3 jobs, sometimes 4, became her life. Sleep was a stolen commodity. Meals were often whatever she could grab on the fly. But every penny, every ounce of her strength, was for Ethan. She was fiercely independent, too proud to ask for charity, but she was never truly alone. Mrs. Albright, her kind, elderly neighbor, became a surrogate grandmother, a steady presence who would watch Ethan when Alice was at work, a beacon of warmth in their often cold apartment. Mrs. Albright's gentle guidance and unconditional affection were a balm to Alice's weary soul, and a second mother to Ethan, filling the void left by his absent father. Memories of those lean years often brought a pang to Alice's chest. She recalled the times she'd patched her worn shoes rather than buying new ones, stretched a single chicken over 3 meals, or shivered in the dark after the electricity bill was paid late, all to ensure Ethan had what he needed. His school supplies were always new, his clothes always clean, even if simple. He never knew the depth of their struggle, because Alice meticulously crafted a world for him free of worry. She was his shield, his rock, always presenting a strong, optimistic facade. Her own fear, her exhaustion, her loneliness, these were things she buried deep, never allowing a flicker of weakness to show on her face, especially not to her son. Kindergarten drop-off was always a gauntlet. The other mothers, immaculately dressed, lingered at the gate, exchanging pleasantries, their lives a stark contrast to Alice's frantic dash. She would arrive in her diner uniform, smelling faintly of coffee and grease, drop Ethan off with a quick hug and a whispered, "I love you," and then hurry away, avoiding eye contact, desperate to melt back into the anonymity of her demanding schedule. She saw the polite but curious glances, felt the unspoken judgment, and it only fueled her drive to work harder, to make a better life for Ethan. One afternoon, during a parent-teacher conference, Miss Davies, Ethan's kind kindergarten teacher, spoke gently to Alice. "Ethan is a bright boy, Alice," she began, her voice soft, "but sometimes he's distracted. A little sleepy." Alice's stomach tightened. "Miss," Davies continued, a knowing look in her eyes, "he talks about waiting up for you, watching for your headlights. He misses you." Alice felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. It was true. Despite her best efforts, the late nights and early mornings meant Ethan often waited up, his small face pressed against the window, longing for his mother's return. Alice promised to try and manage her schedule better, even if it felt impossible. It was a constant balancing act, one that weighed heavily on her heart. As Ethan entered high school, life became a little easier. Alice had secured a steady, better-paying job at a local accounting firm, using the skills she had painstakingly taught herself in her few spare hours. The constant financial struggle eased, but a different kind of distance began to grow between them. Ethan, now surrounded by peers with designer clothes and new cars, grew subtly embarrassed by their old, sputtering sedan and Alice's meticulous budgeting. He'd suggest dropping him off a block away from school, or cringe when she mentioned a coupon at the grocery store. It was a quiet shift, almost imperceptible at first, but Alice felt it keenly, a dull ache in her chest. When college applications arrived, Alice knew she had to give him every opportunity. She took out loans, worked even more overtime, and saved every extra penny. Ethan was accepted into a prestigious university, and Alice's heart swelled with pride, even as she felt a new wave of loneliness. The distance grew wider then, not just geographically, but emotionally. His calls became less frequent, his visits home rare. He was building his own life, a world where she seemed to fit less and less. He spoke of new friends, new experiences, and Alice, listening intently, felt herself fading into the background. He brought girlfriends home sometimes. There was Sarah, sweet and unassuming, who chatted easily with Alice over her simple, home-cooked meals. Alice had liked Sarah, thinking she might be the one, but Sarah didn't last. Then came Eleanor. Eleanor was beautiful, undeniably so, with an air of sophisticated confidence that Alice had never possessed. She arrived at Alice's small, meticulously kept apartment, dressed impeccably, her eyes subtly, almost imperceptibly, scanning the modest furnishings. Alice could feel the unspoken judgment in the air, the silent comparison to Eleanor's own privileged world. Eleanor was polite, almost too polite, with questions that felt like gentle probes. "So, Alice, what do you do?" she'd ask, her tone light, but her gaze sharp. Ethan would quickly step in, deflecting the question with a practiced ease that stung Alice. "Mom's a wizard with numbers, Eleanor," he'd say, a forced chuckle. "But we're talking about my new role at Sterling & Co. You know, your father's firm. That's the real exciting news." He'd then launch into a detailed explanation of his career advancements, successfully shifting the focus from his mother's humble life to his own burgeoning success. Alice would nod along, smiling, but inside, she felt herself shrink, diminished by his subtle dismissal. After Eleanor left, Alice was left with a familiar sense of inadequacy, the echo of Eleanor's unspoken judgment lingering in the quiet apartment. The engagement announcement came over the phone, brief and to the point. "Eleanor and I are getting married, Mom. It's going to be a small, simple affair. Just about 200 guests. Alice listened, her heart aching, but she offered her congratulations, her voice steady. She didn't comment on the irony of small and simple for a wedding with 200 guests, nor did she question why the announcement was a phone call, not a joyous, shared moment. She simply absorbed the news, her mind already understanding her place in this new, grander narrative. The wedding day had confirmed it. She was an embarrassment, a relic of a past Ethan wished to forget. The cleaning staff comment. Ethan's silence. It all cemented her understanding. She was a burden, a shadow on their polished, new life. But then, as the anger and pain slowly subsided, a different thought began to emerge, sharp and clear. They thought her beginnings were humble. They thought she was beneath them. But they had no idea. Their own beginnings, the very foundation of Eleanor's family fortune, weren't as humble as they believed. Not at all. The echoes of the wedding, the stinging laughter, Ethan's silence, still reverberated in Alice's mind. She moved through her small apartment in a daze, the pain a dull throb behind her eyes. In her bedroom, a sanctuary that had witnessed countless silent tears and whispered prayers, she walked to the back of her closet. There, tucked away on the top shelf, beneath a stack of old photo albums, sat a worn, unassuming shoebox. It was heavy, not with weight, but with the burden of years of secrets. With trembling fingers, Alice lifted the lid. Inside, neatly organized in manila folders, lay the ghosts of her past. Yellowed hospital records, detailing a complicated birth 29 years ago. Tucked beside them, a thick dossier from a private investigator, brimming with names, addresses, and meticulously documented timelines. And most recently, a sealed envelope containing the results of a DNA test, conducted in absolute secrecy just a few months prior. She spread the documents on her bed, her gaze fixed on the names, the dates, the cold, hard facts that had once been mere suspicions, then terrifying possibilities, and now, undeniable truths. The hospital records confirmed the specific dates, the unusual circumstances. The private investigator's report, compiled over painstaking months, detailed the life of a man who had briefly, intensely, intersected with Alice's young life, a man whose existence she had once tried desperately to erase from her memory. And the DNA test, the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle, laid bare the biological connection that had bound them all, unknowingly, for decades. Ethan's father wasn't the feckless young man who had abandoned her, vanishing without a trace shortly after she told him about the pregnancy. That narrative, the one she had constructed for Ethan and for herself, was a carefully built lie. A necessary lie, she had told herself, to protect Ethan from the painful truth of his real parentage, and to protect herself from the impossible complications it presented. No, Ethan's true father was a different man altogether. His name was Arthur Sterling. The name resonated with power and influence throughout the city, synonymous with wealth, philanthropy, and a sprawling business empire. He was Eleanor's father, Vivian's husband, the patriarch of the very family who had so casually humiliated Alice and, by extension, her son, at the wedding. The irony was a bitter taste on her tongue. Arthur Sterling, a man respected and feared in equal measure, had absolutely no idea. He lived in his grand estate, presiding over his family and his fortune, entirely oblivious to the fact that he had a son who was now marrying his daughter, and a grandchild on the way. The layers of deception, built not just by Alice, but by the cruel hand of fate, were almost unbearable. Alice had kept this secret for so long, not out of malice, but out of a desperate desire to protect Ethan from the scandal, from the inevitable questions, from the shadow of illegitimacy. She had sacrificed her own happiness, her own truth, for what she believed was his well-being. But now, looking at the documents, feeling the fresh wound of his betrayal, the years of silent sacrifice felt like a fool's errand. What had she truly protected him from? Only the truth of his lineage, while exposing him to the scorn of his own biological family. A fierce resolve settled in Alice's heart, hardening the edges of her grief. The time for silence was over. The time for protection was past. She had made a call 29 years ago, to the feckless young man, telling him she was pregnant, only for him to vanish. She had made a different call in her heart, vowing to herself to raise Ethan alone, shielded from the complexities of his true father's world. But now, she needed to make the call, the one she should have made all those years ago, the one that would shatter worlds, including her own, but finally set the truth free. She gathered the documents, placing them back into the shoebox. She would need them. All of them. The decision, though terrifying, brought a strange sense of clarity, cutting through the fog of pain and self-pity. The next morning, Alice woke with a heavy head, the lingering ache of a hangover from too many tears. Her eyes were puffy, her body weary, but her mind was sharper than it had been in years. The usual morning light filtering through her curtains felt different, imbued with a newfound purpose. The crushing humiliation from the wedding, the raw sting of Eleanor's words and Ethan's silence, still burned, but now it was a fire that forged, not consumed. It fueled her determination, hardening her will. She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the tired lines around her eyes, the faint silver strands in her dark hair, the shadows beneath her gaze. They were all testaments to a life of quiet struggle and profound sacrifice. But now, she saw something else. A flicker of defiance, a glint of steel. The gentle, self-sacrificing Alice was still there. But a new Alice, one willing to fight for her dignity and for the truth, was emerging from the ashes of her shattered pride. The carefully constructed lie of Ethan's parentage was about to come crashing down. And she, Alice Miller, would be the one to wield the hammer. The game, she realized, had just begun. The morning sun, usually a source of comfort, now felt like an insistent spotlight, illuminating the path Alice had to take. Her resolve from the night before had solidified, and as she sipped her lukewarm coffee, her mind drifted back to the beginning, to the origin of the secret that had weighed her down for nearly 3 decades. She was just 18 then, fresh-faced and hopelessly naive, a small-town girl trying to make her way in the big city. She had landed a waitressing job at the Gilded Spoon, one of the most exclusive, upscale restaurants in town. It was a world of crisp linens, clinking crystal, and hushed conversations she knew nothing about. But she loved the buzz, the feeling of being part of something grander. That's where she met Arthur Sterling. He was 35, distinguished, impeccably dressed, and radiated an aura of power and effortless charm. He was a regular, always at the same corner table, always with a new client or associate. Alice, shy yet eager to please, found herself drawn to his magnetic presence. She knew he was married. Everyone knew about Arthur Sterling and his wife, Serafina, a prominent socialite whose picture graced the society pages. But Arthur, with his kind eyes and gentle smiles, made her feel seen, special. Their interactions started professionally, a polite word here, a warm smile there. Then, subtly, they shifted. He'd linger after his meals, sharing snippets of his day, asking about hers. Alice, flattered by the attention of such a powerful man, found herself pouring out her hopes and dreams, her youthful vulnerability on full display. He listened, truly listened, making her feel cherished. Their secret affair blossomed in the hushed corners of late-night rendezvous, in stolen moments that felt like a lifetime. He promised her the world, whispered assurances of a future together, painting vivid pictures of a life free from the constraints of his loveless marriage. "Serafina and I," he'd sigh, his hand gently stroking her hair. "We're just partners, companions. There's no real love left, Alice. You understand, don't you? We'll find a way, my love. We just need time." Alice, young and hopelessly smitten, believed every word. She fell deeply, passionately in love, imagining a life, a family, with him. She dreamed of him leaving Serafina, of their grand revelation, of a future where she would no longer be a secret. She truly believed he would choose her, choose them. The day she gathered her courage and revealed her pregnancy, her heart thrumming with a mixture of fear and hope, was the day the illusion shattered. The change in Arthur was immediate, stark, terrifying. The charming, gentle man vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger. His face, usually so composed, contorted in a mask of panic. He paced, muttering frantically about scandal, reputation, and his wife, Serafina, who, he revealed, was finally trying to conceive. After all these years, the news was a cruel twist of the knife, painting Alice as a deliberate obstacle, a wrench in his carefully orchestrated life. He turned to her, his eyes devoid of warmth. "This is a problem, Alice. A big problem." He offered money, a staggering sum, for an abortion, his voice hard, unyielding. Alice, horrified, refused, clutching her still flat stomach protectively. Her baby, their baby, was not a problem to be erased. When she stood her ground, he offered more. A package, a new life in a different city, anything to make her disappear, to bury the inconvenient truth. "Take it, Alice," he urged, his voice now a desperate plea masked as generosity. "For your own good. For the baby's good. You'll be set for life." Tears streamed down Alice's face. "The baby deserves a father, Arthur," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Our baby deserves to know you." His face hardened. "You knew I was married, Alice," he retorted, his voice dripping with icy contempt. "You can't trap me like this." This was a mistake, nothing more. Those words, "trap me," echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder of his true nature. They were the last words he ever spoke to her. He walked out of her apartment that night, never to return, cutting all contact, severing their connection as if it had never existed. Within a week, Alice was fired from the Gilded Spoon. The official reason was downsizing, but she knew the truth. Arthur Sterling, with his power and influence, had ensured she was scrubbed from his life completely, leaving no trace. She spent her pregnancy utterly alone, moving from one dingy apartment to another, working odd jobs, saving every meager penny for the child she was determined to protect. The loneliness was crushing, but her love for the tiny life within her sustained her. When Ethan was born, a tiny, perfect bundle, Alice saw Arthur's features in his delicate face, the shape of his eyes, the curve of his mouth. It was undeniable. In that moment, a profound decision solidified within her. She would protect Ethan from the harsh reality of his father's rejection. She would create a different story, a simpler, less painful narrative about a deadbeat who had abandoned them. It was a lie, yes, but one born of love and a desperate need to shield her son from the truth of a powerful man's cruelty. Over the years, as Ethan grew, doubts began to surface. He was a sensitive child, and as he entered adolescence, the differences between their humble life and the affluent world of his peers became stark. He struggled to fit in, often feeling ashamed of their old car, their small apartment, Alice's working-class background. He'd ask about his father, questions Alice would deflect with practiced ease, but each question chipped away at her carefully constructed facade. She saw the longing in his eyes, the need for a complete family, and a part of her wondered if her protective lie was, in fact, doing more harm than good. The persistent questions, coupled with the profound sense of unfairness, eventually compelled Alice to act. 3 months ago, after years of wavering, she had discreetly hired a private investigator. It was a costly endeavor, but one she felt increasingly necessary. The investigator, with a blend of professional discretion and uncanny resourcefulness, managed to obtain a DNA sample from Arthur Sterling, a discarded coffee cup from a public event. Alice then, with a heavy heart, convinced Ethan that a general health check included a routine DNA profile for future medical reference, a small, white lie to gather his sample. The results arrived in a plain brown envelope 2 weeks before the wedding. Alice opened it with shaking hands, her breath catching in her throat. The words leaped off the page. 99.9% probability. Arthur Sterling is Ethan's biological father. The confirmation was both devastating and liberating. The truth, stark and irrefutable, now burned bright. Ethan deserved to know his true heritage. He deserved to know that his mother wasn't abandoned by a simple deadbeat, but discarded, along with him, by a powerful man who valued his reputation and wealth above all else. A man who was now, ironically, his wife's father. The time for protecting Arthur Sterling's secret was over. The time for Alice's truth, and Ethan's, had finally arrived. The heavy silence of her apartment amplified the thumping of Alice's heart. She held the receiver of her landline, her thumb hovering over the numbers she had painstakingly retrieved from the private investigator's report. Arthur Sterling's direct office line. This was it, the moment she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, yet never truly believed would come. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, she dialed. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Sterling Enterprises. How may I direct your call? Arthur Sterling, please, Alice said, her voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the tremor she felt deep within. It's urgent. Tell him it's Alice Miller. From Romano's restaurant. She knew those words. The name of the place where their illicit affair had begun would cut through any assistant's polite gatekeeping. It was a secret code, a trigger she was sure would bypass all defenses. There was a brief pause on the other end, a shuffling sound, then a click. Alice? Arthur Sterling's voice, once so familiar, now sounded older, more cautious, edged with surprise. The mere recognition of her name, even after so many years, was a victory in itself. Hello, Arthur, Alice replied. The years of suppressed emotion lending an unexpected coolness to her tone. We need to talk. Face to face. Talk about what? He asked, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Oh, I think we do, Alice countered, her grip tightening on the phone. It's about your son. A sharp intake of breath. My son? I don't have a son, Alice. What are you talking about? His denial was immediate, forceful, a reflex honed over decades of burying uncomfortable truths. His name is Ethan Miller, Alice stated, each word a precise, damning bullet. He's 28 years old, 6 feet tall. He has your green eyes, Arthur, and your stubborn chin. There's no mistaking it. She paused, letting the implications sink in. And he just got married yesterday. To a woman who's 6 months pregnant with your grandchild. The silence on the line was deafening, thicker than the years that had separated them. Alice could almost hear the rapid-fire calculations happening in Arthur's mind, the frantic reevaluation of his past actions, the sudden, horrifying realization of the far-reaching consequences. When he finally spoke, his voice was a strained whisper, stripped of its usual authority. You told me you took care of it. You said, I did take care of it, Arthur. Alice cut him off, her voice rising slightly, imbued with a righteous indignation. I never said how I took care of it. I never asked you for a penny. I never caused you a day of trouble. I raised our son alone, while you built your empire, free from any consequences. She paused, taking another breath, the image of Eleanor's sneering face flashing before her eyes. You want to know what kind of trouble you avoided? Your son married into a family that thinks I'm hired help. Last night, at his wedding, your daughter-in-law, Eleanor, called me a servant in front of 200 people. They laughed at me, Arthur. They laughed at the mother of your son. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly reined it in, letting the raw pain and fury underscore her words. But that's not the worst of it, is it? Alice continued, a cold edge entering her voice. The worst of it is that our son, Ethan, now works for your company. He's married to your daughter, and he has no idea he's marrying into his own biological family. He has no idea who his real father is. She let that hang in the air, the shocking truth a heavy weight. I have the DNA results, Arthur. 99.9% probability. Undeniable. Arthur's response was immediate, a sharp, panicked sound. My family. My reputation. Alice. You can't. You should have thought of your reputation, your family, 29 years ago. Arthur, Alice retorted, her voice hard as stone. When you discarded me and our baby like trash. When you chose your convenience over your own flesh and blood. I need to meet with you, Alice said, her tone leaving no room for argument. We will meet. And you can decide then if you want to do the right thing this time. For Ethan. For his child. For the future. Because if you refuse, if you try to deny this again, I promise you, I will tell Ethan myself. And then I will tell everyone else who needs to know. Your wife, your daughter, the entire city. I have nothing left to lose, Arthur. Nothing you can take from me that hasn't already been stolen. The line was silent once more, but this time, Alice could sense the surrender in Arthur's quiet breathing. She waited, unwavering. Finally, his voice, strained and defeated, came through. All right, Alice, I'll meet you. Where? Riverside Park, she instructed, naming a public place where she felt safe. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. And Arthur? Her voice softened, but the command was clear. Bring a photo of yourself from when you were about 28. Ethan looks exactly like you did then. He deserves to see that. He mumbled a confirmation, and Alice, without another word, hung up. The silence that followed was different now. Not heavy with dread, but imbued with a strange, exhilarating lightness. A sense of purpose, long dormant, coursed through her veins. This wasn't about revenge. Not truly. It was about justice, about dignity, about Ethan's right to his true identity. A right she had protected from Arthur, but perhaps, in doing so, had also unknowingly withheld from her son. The first domino had fallen. The phone call with Arthur Sterling had been draining, yet empowering. Now, Alice faced an even greater challenge, telling Ethan. That evening, she dialed his number, her heart heavy with trepidation. He answered on the third ring, his voice slightly distracted, a familiar pattern since his engagement. Hey, Mom. Everything okay? Eleanor and I are just heading out for dinner. Ethan, I need to talk to you. Alice began, trying to keep her voice even. It's important. Can we have lunch tomorrow? Just you and me. There was a slight pause. Lunch? Mom. I'm really swamped with work, and you know how busy things are with the wedding just over. Plus, Eleanor's got a lot on her plate with the baby coming. He always brought Eleanor into it now. A shield, a barrier. It's about your father, Alice said, letting the words hang in the air. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The usual background noise of his busy life, the faint murmur of Eleanor's voice, vanished. A complete, uncharacteristic silence fell. They had never, not once in his 28 years, truly discussed his father. It was the unspoken subject, the ghost in their shared history. My father? Ethan repeated, his voice slow, cautious, as if testing the words. Yes, Alice confirmed. It's important, Ethan. Please, just an hour. He sighed, a sound of reluctant resignation. Okay, Mom. Fine. There's a small cafe downtown, near my office. The Daily Grind. 1 o'clock, but I really can only spare an hour. The time limit, the cafe choice, the tone. All signals that he viewed this as an obligation, a chore to be completed swiftly. Alice's heart ached, but she knew this had to be done. The next day, Alice arrived at the Daily Grind, 15 minutes early, her stomach churning with nerves. She ordered a simple black coffee, her hands clasped tightly around the warm mug. Ethan arrived precisely 10 minutes late, rushing in, already distracted. He greeted her with a quick peck on the cheek, his eyes scanning the cafe before settling back on his phone, which he placed face up on the table, vibrating almost constantly with notifications. Sorry, Mom. Big meeting after this. What's up? You said it was about my father? His voice was impatient, eager to get this over with. Alice took a deep breath, looking at her son. The green eyes, the stubborn chin. Arthur Sterling's features. Undeniably. Ethan, she began, her voice soft but firm. The man I told you was your father, the one who abandoned us. That wasn't your real father. Ethan froze. His thumb, poised over a text message, stopped. His gaze, which had been fixed on the screen, slowly lifted to meet hers. A cold, distant silence settled between them, a silence far more unsettling than any shouting match. Let me get this straight. he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. A dangerous calm before a storm. My father is Arthur Sterling, the Arthur Sterling who owns half the commercial real estate in this city. Eleanor's father. And you've known this my entire life? The questions were not rhetorical. They were accusations, sharp and cutting. Alice saw the hurt, the betrayal, welling up in his eyes, quickly hardening into rage. Yes, Ethan, she whispered, her own voice thick with unshed tears. I've known. Then the storm broke. Mom, do you have any idea? Any idea how many times I felt like an outsider? How many times I was ashamed of our old car, our apartment, of feeling like I came from nothing? Eleanor's family, they looked down on me, on us, because of our background. And all this time, my actual father was a multimillionaire, the man I work for, the father of my wife? He slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups jump. You kept this from me, my entire life. Why, Mom? Why? Alice reached across the table, trying to take his hand. I was trying to protect you, Ethan. He was a powerful man, married. I didn't want you to grow up with scandal, with the shame of being illegitimate. I wanted to shield you from his rejection. But Ethan wasn't listening. His face was contorted with a mix of fury and profound pain. Protect me? You protected me by letting me believe I had no father? By letting me struggle? When I had a right to a name? To an inheritance? To a family? He abruptly stood up, pushing his chair back with a scrape that echoed through the quiet cafe. I can't deal with this right now, Mom. I just can't. Eleanor's pregnant. We're starting a new life. This is too much. Why now, Mom? He asked again, his voice raw, desperate, demanding an answer. Why after all these years? Why now? When everything is finally… Alice's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about the wedding, about the cruel words, the public humiliation that had finally pushed her to this point. But she knew, in his current state, he would only see her as a troublemaker, someone purposefully disrupting his carefully constructed, privileged new life. He would blame her, not Eleanor, not Arthur. She remained silent, the painful truth lodged in her throat. I have to go, Ethan declared, grabbing his phone, not even touching his coffee. He turned and strode out of the cafe, leaving Alice alone. The words I've arranged for you to meet him today unsaid, dying on her lips. She watched him go, a profound sense of despair washing over her. Had she destroyed their relationship, the one thing she had cherished above all else? That evening, as Alice sat alone in her apartment, the phone rang. It was Arthur. I met him. Alice? He said, his voice subdued. He's angry. Very angry. Mostly at you for keeping this a secret. Alice closed her eyes, a tear escaping. I know. But, Arthur continued, his voice regaining a touch of its usual gravitas, there's no denying it. He's my son. He looks exactly like I did at his age. It's unsettling. A long pause. Alice. I'm sorry. For everything. 29 years too late. I know. But I am truly sorry. The apology, so long awaited, felt hollow. It's not about me, Arthur. Alice responded, her voice tired. It's about Ethan. And his child. Your grandchild. Yes, Arthur agreed. I told him I want to be a part of his life. I've invited him to dinner this week. To meet Serafina and his half-siblings. To properly introduce him to the family, his family, a family that had just humiliated his mother. Alice could only nod, a profound weariness settling over her. The first battle was won, but the war, she knew, was far from over. Days bled into one another, each one passing in a heavy silence from Ethan. Alice's phone remained stubbornly quiet. No calls, no texts. The void left by his anger at their last meeting felt immense, a gaping wound in her heart. Yet, snippets of information, relayed through Mrs. Albright's neighborly gossip network, trickled in. Ethan had been seen at the opulent Sterling mansion. He'd been spotted at the Riverside Country Club, the very place where Alice had been humiliated. But this time, he was with Arthur Sterling, his newfound father. The world, it seemed, was rapidly adjusting to the seismic shift Alice had initiated, everyone except for her and her son. 5 days after their disastrous lunch, as dusk settled, Alice's phone finally rang. The caller ID flashed Eleanor Sterling's name. Alice's breath caught in her throat. She answered, her voice cautious. "Alice?" Eleanor's voice was tight, strained, far removed from her usual polished composure. "It's Eleanor. I need to talk to you. Could you come over tonight? Around 8? A tremor of anticipation, mingled with a familiar dread, ran through Alice. "Tonight?" she repeated, a slight edge in her voice. "What about—" "Please, Alice," Eleanor pleaded, a hint of desperation seeping into her tone. "It's important. I'll explain when you get here." At 8 o'clock, Alice found herself standing at the imposing door of Ethan and Eleanor's upscale apartment. Eleanor opened the door, a shadow of her usual radiant self. Her face was pale, drawn, her eyes red-rimmed, betraying a profound distress. The chic apartment, usually a showcase of carefully curated elegance, felt heavy with unspoken tension. "Come in, Alice," Eleanor mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan isn't here, is he?" Alice asked, already knowing the answer. Eleanor shook her head, wringing her hands. "No. He's at his father's again. Having dinner with Arthur and Serafina." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. They sat on plush velvet sofas, a stark contrast to Alice's simple kitchen table. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her words forced, almost a physical effort. "Alice, about the wedding. About what I said. I'm so sorry." Her eyes, though tearful, still held a flicker of something calculating. "I truly didn't know who you were. I just assumed." Alice cut her off, her voice firm. "You knew exactly who I was, Eleanor. You knew I was Ethan's mother. You just chose to see me as less than." Eleanor flinched, biting her lip. "I know. You're right. My family. We're so focused on appearances, on status. It's ingrained. It's no excuse, I know." Her admission, though reluctant, held a hint of genuine vulnerability. Alice narrowed her eyes, studying the younger woman. "Why now, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice skeptical. "Why are you telling me this now, 5 days after the fact, when you had no problem with it at the time?" Eleanor's facade finally cracked. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks. "Because everything's changed, Alice. Everything. Ethan. He's a Sterling. My baby. It's a Sterling heir. And your position in all of this, it's completely different." Her voice was a mixture of fear, panic, and a desperate plea. Alice felt a familiar knot of disappointment. So it wasn't genuine remorse. It was fear. Fear of social repercussions, of losing her grip on her perfect life, of being cast out of the very circle she had so desperately sought to maintain. Ethan, the son of Arthur Sterling, was no longer a man whose mother could be dismissed as the help. His newfound status elevated Alice, transforming her from an inconvenient embarrassment into a crucial link in a powerful lineage. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, understood the shift in dynamics. "I didn't reveal the truth for revenge, Eleanor," Alice stated, her voice calm but unwavering. "I did it because Ethan deserved to know his real father, his true heritage. He deserved the truth, after a lifetime of being kept in the dark." Eleanor sniffled, wiping her eyes. "He barely speaks to me, Alice. He's been so distant. He said he's ashamed of me, of what I did. He's staying at his father's house. I don't know what to do." Her composure was completely gone now, replaced by raw desperation. "Please, Alice, please help me. Please forgive me. Help me get my husband back." "What did you have in mind?" Alice asked, her tone still guarded. Eleanor took a shaky breath. There's the Sterling Family Charity fundraiser next month. I could make a public apology. Acknowledge my mistake. Praise your strength as a mother. She looked at Alice, her eyes wide with frantic hope. Alice shook her head slowly. No, Eleanor. A public apology now would feel performative. It would be about optics, not genuine change. If you want to rebuild trust with Ethan, and with me, it needs to be through actions. Quietly. Privately. It needs to be real. Eleanor's shoulders sagged, but then she nodded. Slowly. Okay. Okay, Alice. Whatever you say. I want my husband back, and I want us all to be a family. For the baby. Then you need to understand something, Eleanor, Alice said, her voice firm, rising slightly. My worth, as the woman who raised Ethan, the sacrifices I made, the love I poured into him. That deserves respect. Regardless of Arthur Sterling, regardless of your family's fortune, my value as his mother doesn't change because of his name, and neither does his respect for me. Eleanor looked at Alice, a glimmer of genuine understanding, perhaps even admiration, in her tear-filled eyes. I understand, Alice. I truly do. You're a strong woman, much stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Alice rose, the conversation complete for now. As she walked out of the opulent apartment, a strange mix of emotions swirled within her. Eleanor's apology wasn't born of pure contrition, but a necessity, a desperate bid to salvage her marriage and her social standing. Yet, in Eleanor's desperation, Alice saw a crack, a potential for real change, for a path towards healing for Ethan. It was a new, unexpected alliance, forged in the crucible of truth, and for the first time in days, Alice felt a faint glimmer of hope that not all was lost. 6 months later, the world had truly turned on its axis. Alice sat in the sun-drenched living room of Ethan and Eleanor's new house, a sprawling, elegant home gifted to them by Arthur Sterling himself. In her arms, a tiny swaddled bundle stirred, his eyes, a familiar shade of green, blinking slowly. Arthur James Miller Sterling, her grandson, a symbol of a future that had once seemed impossible. The path to this moment had been arduous, fraught with raw emotion and difficult conversations. Ethan, reeling from the shock of his true parentage, had been deeply hurt, his anger a tangible wall between them for weeks. He questioned everything, his childhood, his identity, his mother's every decision. Long, tearful conversations had ensued, Alice patiently explaining her choices, the fear, the desire to protect him. It was only when Arthur Sterling, in a moment of unexpected candor, confirmed her story, acknowledging his own cowardice and her protective instincts, that Ethan truly began to understand. Seraphina Sterling, Arthur's wife, a woman Alice had only known through society columns, had also played an unexpected role. In a quiet, heartfelt conversation, Seraphina had apologized to Alice, not just for the implicit judgment of her family, but for the years Ethan had felt like an outsider, longing for a complete family. She recognized Alice's fierce, unconditional love, acknowledging it was far more profound than any superficial connection to wealth or status. The Sterling family, after the initial shockwaves, had fully embraced Ethan. Arthur, perhaps seeking to atone for past transgressions, had made Ethan a partner in Sterling Development Corporation, recognizing his talent and drive, qualities that clearly mirrored his own. Arthur Jr. and Clara, Ethan's newly discovered half-siblings, had welcomed him warmly, their initial surprise giving way to genuine curiosity and affection. The family, once fractured and defined by hidden truths, was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to heal. Eleanor's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. There were no grand, public gestures, no dramatic declarations. Instead, her change manifested in consistent, quiet acts. She'd bring groceries to Alice's apartment, genuinely seeking her advice on baby names or nursery decorations. She'd call, not for superficial chatter, but to truly connect, to ask about Alice's day. She even began to distance herself from her mother Vivian's materialistic views, often rolling her eyes at Vivian's pronouncements about the right kind of people. One evening, About 3 months before Arthur James was born, Ethan and Eleanor had appeared at Alice's door, beaming. "Mom," Ethan had started, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor and I have something for you." They presented her with a beautifully wrapped box. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a shiny silver key and a deed. The deed to a charming, sun-drenched house on Maple Street, with a sprawling backyard and a porch swing, exactly the house Alice had always dreamed of. Tears, hot and sweet, streamed down Alice's face. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of the profound understanding that every sacrifice, every lonely moment, had been worth it. "But why?" she managed to whisper, her voice choked. Ethan, his arm wrapped around Eleanor's waist, smiled. "Because, Mom," he said, his voice husky, "this baby needs a place to visit his grandmother. A place with a big backyard for him to play in. He needs to know his grandmother's stories, her strength, her love." He then looked at her, his eyes full of remorse and affection. "I'm sorry, Mom. For my anger. For not understanding. You weren't keeping secrets. You were protecting me, and I love you for it." Arthur Sterling, too, had changed. He sought out Alice for conversation, not about business, but about life, about Ethan. In one particularly poignant moment, he admitted his past cowardice, praising Alice's unwavering commitment and the character she had instilled in their son. "You did a magnificent job, Alice," he had said, his voice tinged with regret. "You raised a man I'm proud to call my son." Now, as Alice looked around her new home, filled with the warmth of her reunited family, Ethan, Eleanor, Arthur, Seraphina, Arthur Jr., Clara, and their own children, a profound peace settled over her. The laughter of children, the clinking of glasses, the easy conversation, all blended into a harmonious symphony of belonging. Eleanor, her cheeks flushed with genuine happiness, caught Alice's eye. "I'm still so ashamed of what I said at the wedding, Alice," she admitted, her voice low. "I was so blind, so focused on surface things. You are inherently strong, truly. Much more than any connection to wealth could ever make someone." Alice smiled, a knowing, gentle smile. "Mistakes are part of life, Eleanor," she said, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. "What matters is what we do after them, how we choose to move forward." As she held baby Arthur James, feeling his tiny fingers curl around hers, Alice knew he would grow up understanding his rich, complex heritage. He would know the story of his powerful grandfather, the sacrifices of his brave grandmother, and the enduring truth that character, love, and integrity mattered far more than any fleeting status or material possession. The fractured family, once defined by secrets and superficiality, was now whole, stronger, and more authentic for having been tested. The humiliation, the pain, the truth revealed. It had all been a catalyst for this beautiful, imperfect, and deeply real life they had all found together.